Seraphine Voss had spent 3 years learning how to make herself easy to love. She learned to laugh at the right moments, to dim herself in rooms where Calum Drentha stood, so his light had more space to fill. She learned to fold her opinions into neat, quiet squares and slide them into her pockets before she walked through doors he occupied. She was not ashamed of this. She had simply decided, long ago, that love was something you earned through the steady and patient work of becoming what someone needed. She was wrong, but she would not know that for another 3 minutes. The great hall smelled of pine smoke and winter wine. The midwinter bond ceremony was the kingdom's oldest tradition, the night when chosen pairs were announced, when pack bonds were sealed, when the air itself seemed to hold the shape of something sacred. Sarah stood near the east pillar in a blue dress she had spent 2 evenings deciding on. Her hands were folded. Her face was arranged. Calum walked to the center of the hall. He was handsome in the way that made girls do careless things, tall and golden-haired, with the easy authority of someone who had never once questioned whether he deserved the space he occupied. The pack council watched him from their long table. The court watched him. 200 people in their finest held their breath and waited for his name to land. It landed. It was not Seraphine's. She heard it from across the room, the name of the woman he had chosen, and for a single, private second, something inside her chest rearranged itself, like furniture moved in the night, like a room she had memorized suddenly, without warning, had a different door. Then it stopped. She breathed out. She crossed the hall. People moved aside without quite knowing why. Something in her walk, perhaps. Something about the absence of hurry, the absence of devastation. She reached Calum at the center of the room and she looked at him, and he looked at her with the careful expression of a man who had prepared for tears. She gave him none. "Thank you," she said, quietly, clearly, not with bitterness, and not with performance. "I spent 3 years making myself easier to leave. You saved me from a 4th. She turned. She walked to the doors. She pushed them open. They closed behind her with a sound like a sentence ending. By dawn, she had already petitioned the pack council to dissolve her pack ties. She collected her books from the shelf she had placed them on in Calum's household. She had never quite thought of it as hers, and she packed them into a worn brown trunk with brass corners that had belonged to her mother. She folded her blue dress last, neatly, and placed it on top. She did not cry. This confused her, briefly, until she understood that she had already been grieving for some time. Not over what she had lost last night, over what she had been setting aside, year after year, to make room for a man who had never once asked her to. The eastern cottage had been her mother's. It sat at the edge of the province where the forest met the farmland, and the view from the front window was so wide and so open that the first morning she arrived, she stood at the glass for a long time and did nothing else. She had not realized, until that moment, that she had spent 3 years facing inward, facing him. There had been a view outside this whole time. She made tea. She opened the window. She began. The wall on the eastern edge of her property was falling apart. 3 sections had collapsed over the winter, and the remaining stones were stacked in the kind of disorder that suggested they had given up. She decided to rebuild it herself, on a Tuesday morning, in the pale early light, because the work needed doing, and she had always been someone who did the work that needed doing. She was moving the 3rd stone when she heard hooves. The man who stopped at the fence line was large in the uncomplicated physical way of soldiers, broad through the shoulders, straight-backed, with a face that was serious without being unkind. He had a commander's insignia on his jacket, and the look of someone who had been awake since before she had. Aldrich Vane, she knew him by reputation. Kingdom's war commander, Eastern Province Patrol, not someone who stopped for conversation. He stopped. "You need help," he said. "No," she said, without looking up. He dismounted anyway. She heard the crunch of his boots on the frost. He picked up a stone from the pile, without asking further, and placed it with a precision that told her he had built things before. She let him. They worked without talking for a long time. This did not feel uncomfortable. It felt, surprisingly, like the most honest conversation she had had in years. 2 people doing a task together, without one of them performing for the other. When the wall was finished, he looked at it with the quiet satisfaction of a man who finds meaning in things completed. Aldrich Vane, he said. I know, she said. He almost smiled. Seraphine Voss. I know that too. He rode east. She went inside. The wall stood exactly as they had built it. Solid, without decoration, shaped to last. Something was wrong with his chest the rest of the afternoon. He identified it, incorrectly, as the cold air. Word travels the way water does. It finds every low place. What spread first through the kingdom was not the name Calum had announced at the ceremony. What spread was the other moment, the one at the center of the hall, the blue dress, the words spoken without a tremor. 3 versions of the story existed by the end of the first week. In the first, she had been furious. In the second, she had been heartbroken. In the third, the true one, carried by those who had actually been standing close enough, she had been calm. Completely, unnervingly calm. That third version was the one people could not stop repeating. By the second week, Aldrich Vane had returned to the Eastern Cottage twice. Once with information about a property boundary dispute she had not asked for, and once with no reason at all that he bothered to explain. He helped her cut firewood the second visit. She noticed, in a way she carefully did not examine, that he always asked before he moved things that belonged to her. 2 other alphas were sighted in the eastern province by the end of the month, lingering near the market, inquiring politely about the area's residents. One of them brought her a horse. She already had a horse. I appreciate it, she told him. Mine is named Wren. He left with his horse, which did not have a name, and a thoughtful expression. The solstice market was held in the main square of the capital, and Sarah attended it because she needed candles and a new set of cooking knives, and because the world did not pause for personal seasons of reinvention. She wore green. She had her hair down, which was a small and private decision, but one that felt like something. She was laughing at something Aldrich said, genuinely, not the arranged version she had kept ready for years, but the kind that arrived before she could organize it, when she felt the quality of the air around her shift. She did not look up immediately. She did not need to. When she did look, Calum was standing 20 feet away across the market square, watching her with an expression she did not have a name for. He was not angry. He was not cold. He was looking at her the way a man looks at a door he has closed and then, from the outside, understood for the first time that it had been a very good door. She looked at him for exactly as long as it was comfortable, which was not long. Then she turned back to Aldrich, who had asked her something about the candlemaker's table, and she answered him, and the conversation continued. And she did not look back across the square. She did not need to do that either. The Pack Council met in emergency session on a Thursday. The document placed before them was a formal petition, 3 alphas, requesting the right to court Seraphine Voss, formerly unmated Omega of no significant pack standing, currently residing in the Eastern Province in her late mother's cottage, currently in possession of 2 very good knives, and a horse named Wren. The council member who read the petition aloud did so twice, not because it was long, because it was surprising. 6 weeks ago, this woman had been a footnote in the ceremony records. She had not been significant enough to merit a second glance. Now 3 of the kingdom's most powerful alphas had submitted formal legal documentation requesting the privilege of her attention. Calum Drenthe sat at the head of the table. He said nothing for 11 minutes. The recorder noted this in the official minutes, which was unusual, but the recorder felt it warranted documentation. The council agreed, eventually, that they needed to speak with her. She arrived at the council chamber without being escorted, because she had declined the escort, and the man sent to collect her had not quite known how to insist. She sat in the chair across from 7 council members and 2 clerks, and 1 very large symbolic candle that was lit for formal proceedings, and she folded her hands on the table, and she waited for them to begin. They asked her about her intentions. They asked her about her preferences. They asked her, carefully, what she planned to do about the 3 petitions. She was quiet for a moment, not because she didn't know the answer, but because she was choosing her words with the care of someone who has learned, late and at some cost, that her words have weight. I am not a petition, she said. I am not a matter to be decided on by this table or any other. 3 men have asked to court me. That is their choice, and I respect it. What I do with that is mine. I will choose when I am ready, and I will choose by my own measure, And if my measure does not suit this council's timeline, then the council will simply have to be patient. One of the older members opened his mouth. She looked at him with a pleasantness that was perfectly sincere, and somehow, at the same time, entirely final. He closed it. She thanked them for their time. She left. Two of the clerks wrote her last sentence down. They did this independently, and without discussion, which said something that none of them put into words. She chose Aldrich. Not quickly, not because the world was watching, or because the petition required resolution, or because 3 years of smaller love had left her hungry for the largest version available. She chose him because on a cold Tuesday morning, he had picked up a stone without being asked, and had placed it with care, and had never once suggested that the wall would be better built by someone else. She told him on a Sunday, at the cottage, while they were sitting with tea cooling between them. She said it directly, the way she now said most things, without the careful arrangements she used to make, without the margin she used to leave for other people's comfort. He did not say anything immediately. Then he said, "I was going to ask you." "I know," she said. "Then why did you?" "Because," she said, "I spent a long time waiting for people to choose me. I thought I would try it the other way." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he picked up his tea and wrapped both hands around the cup, and something in his shoulders settled, like a man who has been holding weight for a long time and has finally found a place to set it down. "All right," he said. The bonding ceremony was small. 50 people, by invitation only, at the eastern cottage at the hour just before sunset, when the light came through the front window sideways and turned everything the color of old honey. She wore no particular color. She wore what she wanted. Calum did not attend. This was recorded in the kingdom's social register as a prior engagement, which was a generous reading of his letter, but the council was in a generous mood. Aldrich stood beside her in the kind of stillness that was not absence, the stillness of someone paying very close attention. She noticed this. She had started noticing things she used to overlook, now that she had stopped managing the room around her. When it was done, they went inside. She opened the window the next morning, wide. The view was the same as it always was, the edge of the forest, the pale stretch of farmland, the sky beginning its slow blue-to-gold shift as the sun arrived with the patience of something that has never doubted its own welcome. Aldrich was beside her. His hand rested on the sill next to hers, not on top of it, not wrapped around it, not holding on. Just there, beside her, parallel, two people looking at the same thing. The kingdom was still talking about her. She was aware of this the way you are aware of weather in another city, distantly, without urgency. People had decided she was remarkable. She found this interesting. She had not changed. She had only stopped subtracting herself, and the remainder turned out to be more than she had estimated. She had loved a man once who made her feel that she was a small, careful, provisional thing. She did not blame him for this, exactly. She had been a willing participant. She had handed him the measuring stick, and then stood very straight while he used it. She would not do that again. Outside, the frost was still on the grass, thin and precise, the kind that burns off by mid-morning and leaves no evidence it was ever there. A bird was doing something in the branches of the nearest tree. The wall along the property line stood exactly where she and Aldrich had built it, on a cold Tuesday morning, solid and plain, and shaped to last. She looked at it for a moment. Then she looked at the sky. Then she looked at none of it in particular, which is what you do when you are finally somewhere you intend to stay. You stop surveying, and you simply begin to live inside the view. The tea was getting warm on the counter behind her. Aldrich said something quiet. She answered. The morning continued.